There is a woman named Alice who is 74 years old and who lives 40 minutes from me and who I have loved for 31 years and who I told for the first time 8 months ago with the specific and somewhat shameful awareness that the 31 years of the not telling had been 31 years of the assuming that she knew and the assuming that the knowing was sufficient and the assuming that the sufficient was the same as the giving and that the giving was what the love required and that the assuming had been wrong across all 31 years of its operation. My name is Margaret. I am 72 years old, and I want to talk to you about the not saying and what it costs and why we do it and what changes when we finally stop doing it. Because I have been on both sides of the silence and the saying in the past 8 months, and the difference between the two sides is the difference I most want to give you. I want to begin by telling you about Alice because the telling about her is the honest beginning and because she deserves to be known before the account of what I did not give her for 31 years becomes the primary subject. Alice is the friend who has been the most consistent and the most genuinely present person in my adult life outside of my family. The friend who has been there in the specific and particular way of someone who shows up not for the significant occasions, but for the ordinary ones, who calls not because something has happened, but because it is Tuesday and she was thinking of me and wanted to say so, who listens not with the half attention of someone who is waiting for her turn to speak, but with the full and patient attention of someone who is genuinely interested in what she is hearing. She has been this person for 31 years, and I have been her friend in return, genuinely and with the specific quality of my own particular friendship that I believe has been genuinely valuable to her in ways that she has told me it has been. And I have never told her that I love her. I want to examine the not telling because the examining of it is the instruction, and because the honest examination produces the findings that most need to be shared, which are the specific and ordinary reasons that people who genuinely love the people in their lives do not say the thing that the loving most requires to be said. The first reason I did not tell Alice is the reason that I believe is the most common and the most consistently unexamined of the reasons, which is the assumption that she knew. I assumed she knew because the evidence of my care for her was visible in the 31 years of the showing up and the calling and the listening and the various forms of the active and consistent investment in the friendship that I had been providing. And I understood those things as the language of the love, and I assumed she was reading the language with the same fluency I was speaking it. The assumption is the error. I want to say that clearly and without the qualification that would make it more comfortable and less useful, because the clearly stated error is the useful thing, and the comfort of the qualification is the thing that allows the error to continue uncorrected across the years. The assumption that the love is known because its evidence is visible is the assumption that the other person is receiving the evidence with the interpretation you intend for it. And the receiving of evidence and the interpretation of evidence are two different things, and the interpretation is not guaranteed by the evidence, however clear the evidence appears to the person providing it. Alice did not know. I mean that specifically, and I want to tell you how I know she did not know, which is that when I told her 8 months ago, she cried in the specific and particular way of someone who is receiving something they had not known they were waiting for, but whose arrival reveals the waiting to have been real. The tears of someone who has been given something that the giving of reveals to have been the absence that the relationship was missing, and that the receiving of it fills in a way that makes the previous version of the relationship, however genuine and however valued, feel like the approach to the thing rather than the thing itself. The second reason I did not tell Alice is the reason that I believe is the second most common and the one that operates most specifically between women of my generation, which is the specific and culturally produced discomfort with the direct expression of love between friends in the explicit verbal form that the direct expression requires. I grew up in a household and a culture that expressed love through action rather than through declaration, that understood the daily and particular attentiveness to the welfare of the people you loved as the appropriate form of the loving rather than the specific and sometimes vulnerable declaration of the feeling itself. And the understanding produced in me the specific and somewhat ironic competence at the demonstrating of love and the specific and somewhat ironic incompetence at the naming of it. The demonstrating is real, and it matters, and it is not sufficient. I want to say that as directly as I can, because the people who demonstrate love consistently and thoroughly often believe that the demonstration is the communication, and that the communication is adequate, and that the adequacy means the naming is optional rather than necessary. And the belief is the thing that produces the 31 years of the not naming and the 8 months ago discovery that the 31 years had been 31 years of the love without the specific and particular thing that the naming provides, and that the demonstration, however thorough and however consistent, does not provide in the same way. The thing that the naming provides is the specific and direct confirmation that the love is love, and not the warm and caring friendship that might be confused for something less than love if it is not named as what it actually is. The naming removes the ambiguity that the demonstration, however clear it appears to the person demonstrating, always contains for the person receiving it. And the removal of the ambiguity is the gift of the naming that the demonstration cannot give. The third reason I did not tell Alice is the reason that I think is the most honest and the one I am most reluctant to name, but that the honest account requires me to name, which is that the telling of it required me to be vulnerable in a way that the not telling protected me from, and that the protecting felt like the appropriate management of the risk that the vulnerability exposed. The risk that the vulnerability exposed is the risk of the asymmetry, the risk of saying the thing and discovering that the thing is not received in the form that the saying requires it to be received, for the vulnerability to have been worth the exposure. I was afraid that the telling of Alice that I loved her would produce the specific and somewhat mortifying experience of a woman who has declared a thing that the person she declared it to receives with the warm and somewhat awkward acceptance of someone who is not certain what form the declaration is taking and who is managing her uncertainty with the kindness of a person who does not want to cause distress. The fear was real, and it was the fear of something that did not happen, but that I was not able to assess accurately from the inside of the fear, because the inside of the fear is not the place from which the accurate assessment of its object is available. What happened was what I described, the tears and the filling of the space that had been the approach to the thing becoming the thing itself, and the fear of the asymmetry was the fear that was preventing the thing from being what the 31 years had been building toward, and that the vulnerability of the naming finally allowed it to become. I want to tell you about the other people I told in the 8 months since Alice, because the Alice conversation was the beginning and not the end of the understanding that the not telling had been costing me across the years, and that the telling was recovering. I told my daughter Rebecca that I loved her in a way that was different from the way I had always told her, different in the specific and particular sense of being more direct and more complete and more particular to who she specifically is, rather than the general expression of the parental love that the years of the usual telling had produced. I told her not "I love you" in the form that parents say to children, and that children receive as the expected expression of the expected feeling, but the specific and particular things about her that I loved, the qualities and the choices and the specific and irreplaceable Rebecca-ness of her that I had been receiving with the genuine delight of a mother who is astonished by the person her child has become, and who had not been giving that delight the specific and verbal form that the delight deserved. Rebecca did not cry. She sat quietly for a moment, and then she said that she had not known I saw those things in her, and that the knowing of it was something she was going to carry, and that she was glad I had said it, and the specific and quiet quality of the glad was the quality of someone who has received something real rather than the performed quality of someone who is receiving something expected. I told my sister Carol, who is 69 and who has been in my life for all of my 69 years, and who I have loved in the specific and complicated way of sisters who grew up together and who have the full and complete history of each other, and who have the specific and particular friction that the full and complete history of two people produces, and whose loving of each other has always been present and has rarely been said in the direct and specific form that the present and the rarely said reveals as the absence it was. Carol said that she was glad I said it, and that she loved me too, and that she wished we had been saying it all along, and I said that I wished that too, and we were both quiet for a moment, in the specific and comfortable silence of two women who had just given each other something that the 69 years had been holding in reserve, and that the giving of had made the 69 years more complete than they had been before the giving. I want to tell you about the person I did not tell in time, because the not in time is the most important part of the instruction, and the part that I most want to give you before you produce your own version of it. My friend Dorothy died 2 years before I told Alice. Dorothy and I had been friends for 22 years, and I loved her in the same genuine and consistent way that I loved Alice, and I did not tell her for the same reasons that I did not tell Alice, and the not telling her remained the not telling, because the Tuesday that I described in the title arrived before the Monday on which I might have called and said the thing, and Dorothy died, and the thing remained unsaid. I carry the unsaid thing for Dorothy in the specific and daily way of someone who understands what she did not give to a person who deserved to receive it and who can no longer receive it. And that is the form the regret takes that I most want to prevent you from adding to your own inventory of the things that remain unsaid to the people who can no longer hear them. The inventory grows. Every person who dies before the saying produces the entry in the inventory that cannot be removed, and that is carried forward into the years after the death as the permanent and irrecoverable cost of the not saying while the saying was available. The saying is available right now. I want to give you that with the full and direct weight of everything I have told you in the preceding account, which is the weight of 31 years of the not saying and 8 months of the saying and 2 years of the inventory entry for Dorothy, and the specific and daily knowledge that the saying produces something in the person who receives it, that the demonstrating and the assuming and the protecting of the self from the vulnerability of the naming do not produce. Tell the person, not the general and expected version, but the specific and particular version, the version that names the specific and particular things about the specific and particular person that you love about them, that gives them the gift of being seen clearly and specifically rather than loved generally and adequately. Tell Alice, tell Rebecca, tell Carol, tell the Dorothy before the Tuesday arrives and the telling becomes the entry in the inventory. Tell them today. The 8 months since I started telling have been the best 8 months of my adult life in the specific way that matters most, which is the way of someone who is finally giving the people she loves the full version of what the love contains, rather than the demonstrated version and the assumed version and the protected version that the love was producing before the vulnerability of the saying finally gave it the form it had always deserved to have. The full version is better. It is so much better. Tell them today. Tell them now. The saying is the whole thing. It has always been the whole thing. Tell them now.